Hey everybody, this is TJR,
And this is Superfan.
and just want to comment here on a story that Superfan shared with me today. The headline here is from Louder Online. The headline is Paul McCartney has used AI to create the final ever Beatles song. And my first thought was, until of course they do another one. Let me read this article here first, and then we're going to just talk about it briefly. Paul McCartney is set to release the last ever Beatles song later this year, and it features AI generated John Lennon vocals. While many artists have openly shown their disdain towards the role of artificial intelligence in the music industry, with Nick Cave and Sting both recently airing their disgust over the quickly advancing technology, Paul McCartney has revealed that he recently used AI to create the final Beatles song. In conversation with BBC Radio 4's Today, the former Beatle explains how he sourced the technology to extricate, if I say that right, I want to say extract, but it reads extricate, John Lennon's voice from an old demo so that he could use it to complete an already written piece of music. Of the track, which has not yet been officially revealed, but is rumored to be the unheard 1978 John Lennon song Now and Then, McCartney says, "We just finished it up and it'll be released this year." For the project, McCartney recruited the help of famed director Peter Jackson, who used AI to clean up audio for the acclaimed 2021 Beatles documentary series Get Back. He, meaning Jackson, was able to extricate John's voice from a ropey little bit of cassette, he tells host Martha Kearney. Hopefully, I've said that correctly. We had John's voice and a piano, and he could separate them with AI. They tell the machine that's the voice, this is a guitar, lose the guitar. So when we came to make what will be the last Beatles record, it was a demo that John had. And we were able to take John's voice and get it pure through this AI. Then we can mix the record as you would normally do. So it gives you some sort of leeway. Speaking of his views on the divisive technology, he adds, I'm not on the internet that much, but people will say to me, oh, yeah, there's a track where John's singing on one of my songs, and it's just AI, you know? It's kind of scary, but exciting because it's the future. We'll just have to see where it leads. According to the BBC, the track was dubbed Possible Reunion Song for the Beatles in 1995 during the compilation of their career spanning anthology series, with McCartney receiving a demo a year earlier from Yoko Ono. The demo was lifted from a cassette, which was labeled For Paul, recorded by Lennon in his New York apartment shortly before his death in 1980. Other tracks on the tape, Free as a Bird and Real Love, were previously completed by producer Jeff Lynne and released in 1995 and 1996. However, Now and Then never managed to see the light of day, with George Harrison declaring his cleanup attempt rubbish and refusing to work on it. So that's the whole story there. And the first thing that really comes to my mind with this is that in the article, Paul McCartney says we. He mentions himself, he mentions Peter Jackson. What he doesn't mention is, first of all,
There were
is,
two other people in the Beatles.
well,
Three.
yes. Um, on those, well, then let's back up here. Now that you've said that, let's back up here. On the last two reunion tracks, you had George Harrison and you had Ringo Starr contributing. Ringo playing drums, George Harrison adding guitar. I'm sure McCartney played some instruments as well. Um, they may have all played other instruments too, since they're multi instrumental. And then, of course, you had their vocals too.
Yeah.
What he hasn't said is Ringo involved? Is Ringo going to be playing drums on it? Will he be doing any backup vocals? And what about lifting George Harrison's voice off of AI and adding that in too? So you've got George Harrison as, at least singing backup vocals. Clearly, this is a John Lennon.
Well, we don't know how far they got with this song back in the day in the 90s, too.
That's true, because they were attempting a recording of it, and then George Harrison said it's rubbish what they're doing. So they may very well have guitar tracks that George Harrison might have laid down for it.
But they could also have Danny Harrison play.
That's another possibility. In lieu of that, yes, if they don't have George's guitar, he could play guitar. He could do backup vocals too, I guess. But I'm willing to bet that if it's this track that they're discussing, that they've got hopefully some vocals that George Harrison did for the original sessions that they can pull from. If it's this track, which is what
Yeah.
it's rumored to be, we all could end up being very surprised.
It could be something completely different.
Yeah. But even if it's something, even if they don't have any earlier tracks of George Harrison working on this track, or it's a totally different song altogether, are they going to use AI to recreate George Harrison's voice?
They could do that.
They could do that. I mean, we've already got that one AI track that's out there on the internet where it's Paul McCartney's new and John Lennon is singing a cameo in it as a featured artist, as an AI created featured artist. Not done by Apple Records, just by an outside YouTube creator. And by the way, I'm going to pause here real quick. About a week or 2 weeks ago, I said I was working on a video about what I thought about AI, its implications for music, and I said I was going to have that out soon. I'm almost done with that video. The problem has been is that every time I feel like I've got what I want to say, something else develops with AI that hasn't happened before.
It's very fast moving right now.
It's all very fast moving, and it keeps like making me have to change how I contextualize it. I hope to have that video up this weekend, this Sunday. I'm shooting for. So I just want to let you know, because people have asked me, what do you think of AI? A lot of people have already talked about it. I've taken a bit more time to think about it, and the video that I've been working on is rather all-encompassing. It's a very in-depth discussion of not just what its implications are for music, but for all other levels of the arts, our daily lives, the potential for great harm, why we should maybe be worried about it, but all the great things that are possible too, because like everything else, this type of technology is always a double-edged sword. Just like every piece of new technology as it comes out, it's a double-edged sword. And we just have to learn how to, it's not going away, so we have to learn how to make the most of it. But I just wanted to point that out real quick. So I'm not going to get too deep into those topics on this video. We're just going to talk about this. So, but getting back to this here, even if it's not the track where they could potentially have previous recording sessions of George Harrison either doing vocals or playing guitar, there's nothing to stop them from creating an AI George, just like an AI John has been created by a fan.
This is true.
There's nothing to stop them from doing that. And again, I don't know if anybody should really be presuming what George Harrison would play as far as any instrumental tracks, except maybe his son would probably be the best one, since he's a good musician.
Yeah.
And I think he'd be the one to definitely go to. But none of that's been mentioned. And again, nothing mentioned about Ringo, at least. So I kind of wonder, is this, since they're not saying anything about that, is this really a last Beatles song? Because I feel like if it's just McCartney and Peter Jackson putting this together, it's basically McCartney and Lennon. It's basically, at best, a McCartney-Lennon song
that Peter Jackson helped produce.
Because it is a John Lennon song. And the other two reunion tracks, of course, because that's the only way they could have John Lennon was to work with one of his tracks, one of his older demos. They all become kind of John Lennon driven songs as far as the vocals. Free as a Bird, Paul McCartney would sing the refrain. I have a feeling that we'll probably see kind of the duet thing like we did with Free as a Bird, where it's some of Lennon and McCartney as well singing. And again, someone's already taken McCartney's older recordings, more recent recordings, I should say, and changed it to his young voice. So they could do that too. Have it be young McCartney singing. I don't know. I think it would be easier to have him be young McCartney because you've got a younger Lennon voice to do it that way than to have an older McCartney voice with a young John Lennon voice.
Yeah, that would be a little weird.
That would be a little weird. And so I can imagine it going more that way than the other.
Yeah, it would definitely be living in the uncanny valley.
Yeah, if we heard a young John Lennon and then we heard an older Paul McCartney, and I don't know what the advantage would be to then create an older John Lennon voice as if John Lennon were alive now,
No.
trying to create what that would sound like next to the older McCartney. It just seems to me like the logical choice is to go with the youthful voices, since we know they can do that.
Yeah, obviously.
And they've got the John Lennon vocal track already there. AI just has to pull it out and then make it sound like it wasn't recorded on a cassette tape in a cassette deck sitting on top of John Lennon's upright piano in his bedroom back in the 70s. And with all that said, I feel like I should just give a little shout out that it's amazing what they did back in the 90s with those two reunion tracks, because that's what they were working with, was a cassette tape from a cassette deck sitting on top of John Lennon's piano.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they did amazing work with that before they had AI. So obviously this is going to sound a lot better. But yeah, I have to wonder, is this really a Beatle track, or is it just Paul McCartney working on one of John Lennon's old demos?
Yeah.
If you're not going to have Ringo there since he is alive and have him play on the track at the very least, and then try to AI recreate George, yeah, I don't see how it could be a Beatles track. And they don't say that about this in the article. So that's my one real question. Now, with all that said, though, does that mean if it doesn't have an AI George and Ringo's not taking part, does that mean I'm not interested? Of course I'm interested. How could I not be? Especially if it's the track they're talking about. It's a John Lennon recording that we've never heard.
Just for the technology test.
Yeah, just for the technology test. I mean, but we have kind of heard that. Someone, and I'll be talking about that in the video that I'll be discussing this week, but someone did take a demo that was posthumously released by John Lennon and basically created as if the Beatles were playing on it, managed to create how the other instruments would sound, how the other voices would sound, and created this AI version of the song. That sounded great. It sounded absolutely startling. I'm going to guess it's probably what they're talking about. But then again, to me, it seems obvious that if that's what they have, then they hopefully have something of George Harrison they can pull from too. And if they're going to do that, then obviously they got to get Ringo as well. Let us know what you think of this. Are you excited? I don't see how you can't at least be interested. And as always, if you like these videos, be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. Thank you, patron supporters.
You are fierce and mighty.
Patron supporters do receive exclusive weekly videos not available on this channel. If you'd like to be a patron supporter, go to patreon.com/TJR, the original. And again, this weekend, be watching for my in-depth video essay on AI and what are my thoughts on it as far as music, art, movies, and life in general. And we'll see you in the next video, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.